when I lived in Kansas City, I had just moved apartments. And I unfortunately discovered that there were quite a bit of cockroaches living underneath my new house. And my landlord said, "Oh, that's your problem." And I was like, "Oh." And it was quite stressful. And I also had a cat at the time. And so it wasn't like I could just like bomb the house and then leave. And one of my coworkers said, "Just bring your cat over, put your cat in the car, set off the bombs, bring your cat over to my house. We'll put him in the bathroom for the day. And then you can come pick him up and you take him home and y'all will be all right." That moment, I don't even know if that person would even remember that happened, but it was one of those moments where I went from everything was overwhelming and hard to a way forward. And the theme for this month is generosity. And that coworker taking the time to say, "Yeah, bring your cat over to my house. No worries, we'll work it out," was, to me, in that moment, the generosity that I needed. And I could tell endless stories of people doing something kind, generous, whether it's something we might consider little or using their wisdom to realize that maybe I needed a bigger support, whatever that was. And I would assume that most of us could probably also tell endless stories of times when people went out of their way to do something kind and generous for us. And so I strive to live in that same generosity mindset, or maybe we could call it a generosity heart set. I pay attention to the times when there's ways that I have the ability to make life easier or smoother or clearer for the people around me. Now, we also often think of generosity alongside abundance or prosperity. And so I found this quote from Unity co-founder Myrtle Fillmore, that I think really points us in the right direction. And she said, "True prosperity is not making money or putting out goods or developing property. It is determining what our souls require in order to cause them to unfold more of God, and then how to harmonize their expression with the needs of our fellow human beings so that all are benefited and inspired to unfold and express more of their inner spiritual resources. The exchange of merchandise and money is merely incidental to this spiritual association and growth. Money success comes as a result, but there are other results that should be sought and rejoiced over more than the financial return." What our souls require in order to cause them to unfold more of God. I don't know about you, but that makes me a little tingly. What our souls require. And then to harmonize their expression with the needs of our fellow human beings, so all are benefited and inspired to unfold and express more of their spiritual resources. And what's beautiful is this statement isn't against business or money, but it puts those things in the tool category. Expressing our best God self and harmonizing with our fellow earthlings is a priority. business, money, all of those things are tools to do those things. Another way I would say this is that we're called to co-create a world that works for all. A world that works for all is a world where everyone is safe and nourished and has both their basic needs met, but also a chance to follow their dreams and have meaning to their lives. I think that's what Myrtle was talking about, right? Now, sometimes when I start thinking about things like, how do I best benefit humanity? I get overwhelmed or stuck in making a decision because there's so many things, there's so many impacts to calculate. And then you're just like, moving any direction has impact. It can be overwhelming. And so it's wonderful that in the Book of Joy, which many of us are reading by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, they make a great clarification. And so this is a quote from Desmond Tutu in response to this kind of question. And he says, start where you are and realize that you are not meant to be meant on your own to resolve all of these massive problems. Do what you can. It seems so obvious, and you will be surprised, actually, at how it can be catching. It helps no one if you sacrifice your joy because others are suffering. We people who care must be attractive, must be filled with joy so that others recognize that caring, that helping and being generous are not a burden. They are a joy. Give the world your love, your service, your healing, but you can also give it your joy. I want to point out that he says helping and being generous are not a burden. And so if it's become that, then there needs to be a look back to cultivating balance and finding your joy. Because as Myrtle said, we should be, cultivating our deepest selves and doing that, how we harmonize that with humanity. And that's, it should be a joy. Of course, when we find things that we don't like, we need to release. It's not necessarily pleasant all the time, but in general, it should be a joy to become more in tune with our deepest selves. I think that generosity is both an aspect of our being and a way we express. I think that the more we practice generosity, the more it wires us to be generous. It becomes a habit, a way we show up. And maybe as we take baby steps in these things or bigger steps, it helps us trust that it makes a difference. No matter what we give away, we continue to have more to give. There are plenty of studies that show how we change and benefit from kindness and generosity. There's even studies that prove that kindness and generosity increase our physical health, they increase our mental health, and that's just a side benefit from making the world a better place. Not that I need to convince any of you that being generous is a good thing. And our generosity can show up in many different ways: financial support, volunteering, gifts, time, mentoring, errands, tasks, kind words. And here's one sometimes we struggle with: gracious receiving. Gracious receiving is a way to be generous. a child brings you a dandelion, you say, thank you. We don't say, oh, I don't need anything. Gracious receiving. And of course, there's more ways than all those things I listed to be generous. So you all know being generous is good for us in our community. We like it. We enjoy it. And we know that we can't solve all things, but that we do our part. So I want to bring us back to Jesus and to Myrtle Fillmore. They deserve to be in the same sentence. Jesus, he was popular. Who was he popular among? He was popular among the folks on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, right? He was popular among the people who, for them, life was rough. And he was popular among them because he was teaching that our job was to take care of each other and that we all belong and that no one is outside and to keep doing our best. And some of the things he taught about that, of course, were quite revolutionary. But he taught what made sense to the people at the bottom. Of course, these teachings were very unpopular for the people on the other end of the spectrum who wanted stratification because that meant they kept power. And there's something to be remembered in that and how it's an important thing to remember. I think that teaching that we're all worthy and beloved in God's figurative eyes is the basis of call to care for our fellow earthlings. And it's not unique to the teachings of Jesus. It's built into most faith traditions. Care for our fellow earthlings. And I say earthlings because I don't mean just the peoples. How do we care for all of our fellow earthlings? And so Myrtle, back to Myrtle, she said, determine what our souls require in order to unfold more of God and how to harmonize with the needs of our fellow humans. We don't have to have a 10-step plan. We just start where we are with the love and the compassion and the wisdom and the joy of our highest selves. And then we continue our journey. We show up that way. New opportunities will emerge for our own growth and our service to our fellow human beings and our quest to create a world that works for all. So here's the tricky bit. Hopefully you knew it was coming. And that is, I nudge you to move into your growing edge. There's the comfort zone and there's the scary zone. And then there's the growing edge where we're moving more and more into who we've come here to be. The good stuff happens at the growing edge. And so things to think about, to consider, to bring into your heart. In what ways and to whom is it a bit uncomfortable to be generous, kind, and compassionate? That's not to say that we don't have boundaries about inappropriate or unkind behavior. We certainly can. However, there's a difference between having boundaries and putting them outside. And I'm not just talking about the people that it's easy to say, oh yeah, the kind of the big ones, but even the people closest to us. Do we, just considering, are there ways that we put a separation with our generosity or our kindness or our compassion? So, and then we take that to the next level in our communities. I'm sure we all could come up with people who show up in the news who we might have difficulties being generous and kind and compassionate too. But my question is having those thoughts about them helpful to anyone? Is it just poisoning you? So that's where the heavy lifting part of this comes from. Can we say, I understand, or I recognize that this person, even if I completely disagree with them, even if I completely disagree with them, still at their core is desiring to do the right thing, even if I completely disagree with them and how they got to their conclusion about what the right thing is. I'm not saying you have to agree with them. I'm just saying, can we see them as a fellow human being? I don't think that that's too generous. So I'm not saying it's easy. It is our deepest calling as people of faith and as people who walk the earth. To dive in more to what our souls require to unfold more of God and to harmonize with our fellow humans, to bring everyone to the table. So may we always know the abundance and joy of cultivating our generosity of spirit, of cultivating a generosity heart set,